Granddaughter's quinceañera was supposed to be the happiest day of the year. At least, that's what I kept telling myself as I sat at table 3. Not table 1, not even table 2, with my purse in my lap and a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched, watching my son's wife adjust the centerpieces for the 4th time like she owned the place. She did, in a way. She planned everything. I'd just written the check. $42,000. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it because when you're 63 years old and your son calls you on a Tuesday afternoon and says, "Mom, Cassandra wants to do something really special for Lily's 15th birthday, but you know how tight things are right now," you don't say no. You never say no. Not when it's your only grandchild. Not when you remember the little girl who used to fall asleep on your lap watching old musicals on Sunday afternoons. So I wrote the check. I didn't ask for my name on the program. I didn't ask to help plan. I just wanted to be there, to sit close enough to see Lily's face when they lowered the lights and brought out the cake. But Cassandra had other ideas about where I belonged. I should back up. My name is Nadine. Nadine Holloway. I am 63 years old. I live in Tucson, Arizona. And for the past 4 years, since I sold my house in Phoenix and stopped working the job I'd had for 28 years as a hospital administrator, I have been doing something that my son called a phase and my daughter-in-law called more than once. A little sad. I make furniture, not hobby furniture. Not the kind of thing you sand on weekends and put in the garage. I mean real furniture, custom pieces, commission work, things that end up in architects' offices and boutique hotels and the living rooms of people who care very deeply about how a chair feels when you sit in it. I started with a 12-week woodworking course at a community college the winter after I retired, then another course, then a 6-month apprenticeship with a craftsman in Sedona who'd been doing this for 40 years and told me at the end that I had an instinct for wood that most people spend a lifetime chasing. I didn't know what to do with that compliment, so I just kept working. By the time Lily's quinceañera came around, I had a small workshop behind my rental house, a waiting list of 8 months, and a business that had cleared just over $110,000 the previous year. Not life-changing money, but my money. Money I made with my hands and my decisions and the kind of focus that only seems to arrive, in my experience, once you stop trying to be everything to everyone. My son Garrett knew I made furniture. He'd been to the workshop twice. He called it impressive, in the way people call something impressive when they're slightly embarrassed by it. Cassandra had never been. She referred to it always as your little woodworking thing, and she said it with a particular softening of the voice. Not mean, exactly, just gently diminishing, like you talk about a child's finger painting. I had learned not to correct her. The quinceañera was at a rented event hall in Scottsdale. Pink and gold, Lily's colors, 300 guests, a live band, a taco station, a dessert table that I'm fairly certain cost more than my first car. The hall itself was beautiful. Exposed brick, string lights, a dance floor that gleamed under the chandeliers. I'd been to the venue once, during a site visit Cassandra had invited me to and then uninvited me from in the same text message. "Actually, it'll be overwhelming with too many people there. We'll send you pictures." I found out about table 3 the day of the event. When I arrived and looked at the seating chart posted near the entrance, my name was there, between 2 of Cassandra's cousins I had never met, across the room from the family table where Garrett and Cassandra and their 2 younger boys sat with Cassandra's parents and her sister. The family table had a better sight line to the dance floor. It had the little gold-painted chairs with the tulle bows. Table 3 had folding chairs with cushions. I stood at that seating chart for a long moment. Then I found my seat, put my purse in my lap, and ordered sparkling water. Lily came to find me before the formal program started. She was wearing a blush pink ball gown, with her hair pinned up in a small crown of real flowers. And when she saw me, she ran over, actually ran, in heels, and hugged me for a long time without saying anything. She smelled like hairspray and the vanilla lotion she'd used since she was 9. I held on. "I'm so glad you're here, Grandma Nadine," she whispered. "There's nowhere else I'd be," I said. And I meant it. I meant it completely, even from table 3. The program started an hour in. There were toasts, traditions, the waltz with her chambelanes, the changing of the shoes. Cassandra's sister, who was serving as the unofficial MC for the evening, took the microphone between segments to fill the transitions. She was charming and funny, and the crowd loved her. And then she said something that made the room laugh in a way that didn't feel entirely comfortable. Now, as many of you know, Lily's grandmother, Garrett's mom, is a very creative woman. She smiled in my direction, and 300 heads turned toward table 3. She's retired now and spending her golden years doing woodworking. Little projects, little tables. It's very sweet. She pressed her hand to her heart. We just think it's so adorable that she found herself a hobby. Garrett, didn't she make you a cutting board? Garrett laughed. He actually laughed. From the family table across the room, I watched my son laugh. She did, he said into the secondary mic someone had handed him, shaking his head like it was the most endearing, harmless thing in the world. She's very into it. She's got a whole— He waved his hand vaguely. Workshop situation. More laughter. Cassandra was smiling at her hands. A workshop situation, Cassandra's sister repeated, delighted. I love that. You know, some women get into yoga after retirement, some take cruises. Nadine builds little tables. She paused for effect. We love you for it, Nadine. Truly. The applause was kind, warm even. And somehow that made it worse. I kept my face completely still. I have been a hospital administrator for almost 3 decades, which means I have sat across from people delivering devastating news, people in crisis, people who were furious and afraid, and I have learned to make my face into something neutral and calm, regardless of what was happening inside. It's a skill. I deployed it then like armor. I did not look away. I did not look down. I held my smile like I'd paid for it, which, if you thought about it, I had. Cassandra's sister moved on. The band started up again. People went back to their conversations. I drank my sparkling water and watched my granddaughter dance and thought about nothing at all. Dinner was served. The table around me filled in. Cassandra's cousins, as expected, who were pleasant enough and asked me nothing about myself after I confirmed that yes, I was Garrett's mother. I ate my food. I watched Lily do her waltz. I thought about a commission I had due the following month. A dining table for a couple in Paradise Valley who'd found me through a design firm in Scottsdale. That's when things shifted. The design firm. I had been working with Thornwood Design Group for about 8 months. They were boutique, high-end, the kind of firm that did full home renovations for clients whose budgets started at 7 figures. They'd found my work through a craftsman referral network, contacted me about a custom credenza for a client's study, and when the client saw it in person, they'd call Thomas Rowe, the firm's founder, directly and said they wanted me to do every piece of wood furniture in the house. Thomas and I had been in contact almost weekly since then. He was serious and precise, and he respected my work in a way that felt, frankly, like fresh air. I did not know that Thomas Rowe was a guest at the Quinceañera. I did not know that his wife had been Cassandra's college roommate. I did not know any of this until, about 20 minutes after the little table speech, I looked up from my plate and saw a man in a charcoal suit standing 2 tables away, staring at me with an expression I can only describe as confused recognition. He was trying to place me outside of context, the way you do when you see your dentist at the grocery store. I placed him immediately. We looked at each other for a moment. Then Thomas Rowe walked over to my table, leaned down slightly, and said quietly, Nadine Holloway? Thomas, I said. I didn't know you'd be here. My wife and Cassandra. He paused, something moving across his face. You're Garrett's mother. I am. He stood up straight. He looked toward the family table, then back at me. Then he looked at the seating chart near the door, which was still visible from where we stood. Then back at me. He picked up a chair from the empty table beside us, carried it over, and sat down next to me without asking permission or explaining himself. I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, he said. His voice was low and even. You made the credenza in the Kessler house. I did. And the console table in the Whitmore foyer. Yes, and you're currently building a dining table for the Aldridge family. 14-foot harvest table, white oak. I'm about 6 weeks out. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the Aldridges are close friends of the Wentworths. Do you know who the Wentworths are? I shook my head. They're the ones who recommended us to 4 new clients this year because of the credenza you built. 4 clients, Nadine. The word they used was irreplaceable. He set his water glass down. I've been trying to figure out how to talk to you about expanding our relationship. More pieces, potentially an exclusive arrangement for the residential side of our business. I looked at him. I said, I have a waiting list. I know, he said. I'm asking you to consider letting us become the front of that list. From somewhere across the room, I heard Cassandra's sister's voice rising again as she returned to the microphone to introduce the next segment. The band quieted. 300 people turned their attention back to the front of the room. Thomas did not turn around. He was looking at me. And then he stood up. I touched his arm lightly and said, "Thomas, you don't have to." "I'd like to," he said. And something in his voice was very settled and very deliberate. He walked toward the microphone. He caught the attention of the MC, Cassandra's sister, and said something quietly to her. She looked surprised. She handed him the microphone. The room settled. "I apologize for the interruption," Thomas said. He had the kind of voice that rooms listen to without being asked. "My name is Thomas Rowe. I'm a guest here tonight through my wife, who was Cassandra's roommate at Arizona State. And I want to say first that this has been a beautiful celebration." He smiled toward Lily, who was standing near the cake table looking confused. "But I also want to say something, if the family will allow me, because I think there's been a small misunderstanding tonight that I'd like to clear up." Garrett was watching from the family table. Cassandra had stopped smiling. "I run a design firm in Scottsdale," Thomas continued. "Thornwood Design Group. Some of you may be familiar with our work. We work with some of the most distinguished homes in the valley." He paused. "For the past 8 months, we've had the privilege of working with one of the finest furniture makers I've encountered in 20 years in this industry." He looked at me across the room. "Her name is Nadine Holloway. She's been described tonight as someone with a hobby. I want to respectfully offer a different description." The room was very quiet. "Nadine's work is in the homes of 5 of our clients, all of whom have specifically requested her by name for future projects. We have referred her to colleagues in Phoenix, in Sedona, and in Santa Fe. The waiting list for her commissions is currently 8 months long, and last year her workshop generated revenues that would surprise most people in this room." He set the microphone down gently on the podium. "That's not a hobby. That's a business built from scratch, after 60, by someone with extraordinary skill and the kind of discipline most people half her age couldn't match." He came back to my table and sat down. The room stayed quiet for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then someone started clapping. I don't know who it was, but the applause spread and it was real. Not the warm, slightly pitying applause from earlier, but something that felt like recognition. Lily was clapping from across the room, both hands raised, her little crown askew. I looked at Garrett. He wasn't laughing. His face was complicated, embarrassed, I think, and something else underneath that I recognized but couldn't name. He looked like a man in the middle of understanding something he'd refused to understand for a long time. Cassandra was looking at the table. Her sister had put the microphone back on its stand and was studying the ceiling. I turned to Thomas and said quietly, "You didn't have to do that." He said, "Someone had to." Lily found me again near the end of the night. The guests were starting to drift toward the exits. The band was playing something slow, and she came and sat beside me with her shoes off, her feet in ivory stocking soles, looking simultaneously like a child and a young woman. "Grandma Nadine," she said, "I'm sorry. You don't have anything to be sorry for, sweetheart. Mom should have put you at the family table." I looked at her carefully. She was 15 and she was not wrong, and I thought about what to say to a 15-year-old about the complicated arithmetic of family loyalty and dignity, and when to speak and when to let things go. I said, "Your mom worked very hard on tonight. It was a beautiful party." "It was," Lily agreed. But, I said. She leaned her head on my shoulder for a moment. "Can I come to your workshop? I want to see what you make." "Anytime you want," I said. "I'll teach you how to use the hand planes if you want." "What's a hand plane? Come to the workshop and I'll show you." She laughed, and it was the laugh she'd had since she was small, surprised and open and unguarded. I pressed my cheek against her hair for a moment. Garrett came to find me before I left. He waited until Cassandra was occupied with the venue coordinator and walked over to where I was getting my coat, and he stood there for a moment without saying anything. "Mom," he said finally. "To Garrett." He looked older than usual. "Tired, maybe." "I didn't know Thomas Rowe was going to do that." "Neither did I said. I didn't know things had gotten that big. With the business." I looked at him. I thought about 28 years of writing memos and managing budgets and advocating for my staff, and then 4 years of learning something completely new. Alone, in a workshop, with nothing but sawdust and stubbornness, and the particular kind of freedom that comes when you stop waiting for other people to believe in you. "You never asked," I said. Not angrily, just truthfully. He looked at the floor. He looked like he was 12 years old. "I know." I put my coat on. I picked up my purse. Then I reached out and put my hand on his arm for a moment. "Come to the workshop," I said. "You and the boys. Come see what I do." He nodded. He still hadn't looked up. I left first. The drive back to Tucson was 90 minutes, and I spent most of it with the radio off, watching the desert pass in the dark. The saguaros stood against the sky like they always do out here, patient and enormous and completely unconcerned with what anyone thinks of them. I thought about calling someone, my sister in Albuquerque, my friend Peg, who I've known since nursing school and who would have said something perfectly acerbic and comforting. But it was late, and I wasn't sure what I would even say. The strange thing about a moment like that, a moment when you've been publicly diminished and then, just as publicly, seen, is that neither one of them tells you who you are. I had known who I was when I sat at table 3. I had known it while Cassandra's sister described my life as adorable. The knowing doesn't depend on the room. But I'll be honest with you, it helped. Having someone say it out loud in front of 300 people, to the same audience that had laughed, it helped more than I wanted it to. I pulled into my driveway a little after midnight. The workshop light was on. I'd left it on when I rushed out that afternoon, which I do sometimes when I'm in the middle of something and don't want to lose the thread of it. I sat in the car for a moment, looking at the light coming under the workshop door. Then I went inside, changed my clothes, and went back out. The piece I'd been working on was a sideboard. Red oak, hand-cut dovetails, a small hidden compartment near the base that the client had requested for what she called important papers. I'd been struggling with the fit of one of the drawers for 2 days. I'd been thinking about it at the quinceañera, actually, between the sparkling water and the little table speech and Thomas Rowe pulling up a chair at table 3. I sat down at the bench. I picked up the drawer. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I found the problem. I don't know why I'd been missing it. The fit was slightly off on the back corner, a fraction of a millimeter, which sounds inconsequential but isn't. Not in work that's supposed to last for generations. I adjusted, tested, adjusted again. At 2 in the morning, the drawer slid in and closed with the particular soft resistance of a perfect fit. That small sound. That very precise, very quiet click. I sat back on my stool and put my hands in my lap. That's it, I thought. That's why I do this. Thomas Rowe and I met for coffee the following week and talked for 3 hours about what an expanded arrangement might look like. I'm not going to go into every detail, but I will say that by the end of the meeting, I had agreed to give Thornwood Design Group priority access for 4 commissions per year, and Thomas had agreed to my rate, which after that conversation I raised by 15%. He didn't negotiate. He said the rate was fair. It was fair. Garrett did bring the boys to the workshop about a month later. He came on a Saturday morning, and he stood at the door for a moment before coming in, looking around at the tools and the wood and the work in progress on the bench, and something in his face shifted in a way I hadn't seen before. Not embarrassment this time, something quieter. His youngest, who is 8, immediately asked if he could touch everything. I said yes to most of it and no to the chisels. Garrett ran his hand along the top of a cherry side table I'd finished the week before. He said, "Mom, this is," and then stopped. "It's okay," I said. "Mom, this is this," and then stopped. "It's okay," I said. "No," he said. "I mean it. This is good work, Mom." I handed his youngest a piece of sandpaper and showed him the direction of the grain. He took to it immediately with the focused seriousness of a child given a real task. "I know," I said to Garrett. "I've been trying to tell you." He looked at me. "I know you have." We didn't resolve everything that morning. I don't think you can resolve years of small dismissals over one Saturday in a workshop, and I wasn't looking to. What I wanted, what I'd always wanted, was just to be seen doing the thing I was doing. To have him stand in the space where I worked and understand, in the concrete and undeniable way that only physical presence allows, that this was real. He understood it that morning. I could see it. That was enough for now. I did not move to the family table at the next family gathering. I'm putting that here because I want to be honest. Things don't transform overnight just because one evening took a turn. Cassandra is still Cassandra. The dynamic is still what it is. I still sometimes feel the particular weariness of being in a room where you are loved in theory and underestimated in practice. But I go to my workshop every morning. I have a waiting list that is now 10 months long. Last spring, a piece of mine appeared in a home that was featured in the design magazine out of Phoenix. A small mention, just a caption, but it said, "Custom Furniture by Nadine Holloway of Tucson, and I cut it out and pinned it above my workbench. Lily has been to the workshop 4 times now. She has opinions about wood grain and very little patience for fine sanding, which honestly tracks with being 15. She asked me last month if I would make something for her apartment someday when she had one. I said I would make whatever she wanted. I said I would make it and it would last. That's the thing about good work, really good work, the kind built with attention and patience and the willingness to get the fit exactly right even at 2 in the morning. It stays. Long after the party is over, long after the speeches are forgotten, long after the applause fades and the folding chairs go back in storage, it stays and it's solid, and it holds whatever weight you put on it. That's enough. More than enough. That's everything. I've thought a lot about that night. Not obsessively, I'm too busy for that, and honestly the workshop doesn't leave much room for rumination once you're in the middle of something. But I've thought about it the way you think about a thing that quietly rearranged something in you without asking permission first. What happened to me at that party wasn't unusual. I want to say that plainly, because I think a lot of people who watch their families laugh at them, gently, warmly, like it was all very sweet, will understand what I mean. The cruelty wasn't sharp. It wasn't intended to wound. That's almost what made it harder to sit with afterward. Cassandra's sister wasn't a villain. Garrett wasn't a villain. They were people who had decided without ever saying it out loud that I had a ceiling, that 60 meant finished, that starting over meant playing pretend. And once a person decides that about you, they stop looking closely enough to see anything different. That's the thing about dismissal. It's self-sealing. You don't look at someone you've already categorized. You don't ask questions you think you already know the answer to. I had been categorized, and so no one had asked. And I had let that happen, I'll admit it, because I told myself it didn't matter what they believed, as long as I knew what was true. But here's what I've come to understand. There's a difference between not needing someone's approval and accepting invisibility as a permanent condition. I confused those two things for a long time. I thought keeping my head down and doing good work was enough. And it is enough for the work. It is not always enough for the relationship. What Garrett and I lost in those 4 years wasn't animosity. We didn't fight. We were perfectly pleasant at holidays. What we lost was honesty. I stopped telling him what I was building because I was tired of watching his face do that particular thing it did. That small, gentle reframing that turned everything I said into something smaller and safer than what it actually was. And he stopped asking because I'd stopped offering. We were both protecting ourselves from the discomfort of being misunderstood, and we ended up just not knowing each other very well at all. Thomas walking to that microphone didn't fix any of that. But it cracked something open that needed cracking. It made the invisible visible in a room full of people. And once a thing is visible, it becomes very hard to unsee. What I keep coming back to is this. The work was always real. The waiting list was always real. The drawer that clicked shut at 2 in the morning was always real. The drawer that clicked shut at 2 in the morning was always real. None of that changed because one man said it into a microphone. But I learned something that night about the cost of staying quiet when you are capable of speaking. Not for the sake of approval, but for the sake of truth. There's a version of dignity that keeps everything close to the chest and asks for nothing. I lived in that version for a long time. I'm not sure it served me as well as I thought. Lily comes to the workshop now. She is 15 and impatient, and she has opinions about everything, which I find completely wonderful. She is learning that good work takes longer than you want it to and costs more effort than you plan for, and that the results of that effort are solid in a way that shortcuts simply are not. I think that's the most honest thing I know how to teach her. Not through a speech, just through showing up at the bench every morning and doing the thing as well as it can be done. That's all any of us can do, really. Show up. Do the work. Let it be as good as it actually is. Not smaller. Not apologized for. Not tucked away to make someone else more comfortable. It's enough. I promise you, it's more than enough.